My name is Delia Frost. I am 34 years old. I'm a registered nurse, and I found out my sister had been forging my license for 2 years when the state nursing board called my cell phone on a Tuesday afternoon. The woman on the phone was polite and careful, the way people are when they're about to change your life. She said she was calling from the board's investigations unit, and that they were reviewing documentation submitted by a wellness company, and that my name and license number appeared as the supervising nurse on a set of records, and could I confirm my employment there? I had never heard of the company. She read me the name. Radiant Life Wellness. And something cold went through me, because I knew that name. It was my sister's company. Camille's company. The med spa and wellness business my glamorous younger sister had opened 2 years earlier, the one the whole family was so proud of, the one that had made Camille the family success while I was, in my mother's words, still just doing bedside. I told the woman from the board, carefully, that I did not work there, had never worked there, and had never authorized the use of my name or license by that company or anyone in it. There was a pause. And then she said the sentence that told me exactly how bad it was. She said, "Ms. Frost, we have documents going back almost 2 years bearing your signature and your license number. If you're telling me you didn't sign them, then what we have is a licensure fraud matter, and I need you to understand that until this is resolved, your license is what's at risk." My license. The thing I'd worked 6 years and buried myself in debt to earn. The thing my family had called a waste. It was, at that moment, hanging by a thread, because of a signature I had never once put on a page. I did not scream at the woman. I did not fall apart. I have spent my whole career staying calm in the exact moments other people can't, and I stayed calm now. I said, "I understand, I'll cooperate fully, and I'll prove I never signed anything. What do you need from me?" And I wrote down every instruction, and I thanked her, and I hung up, and I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and I did not cry, because crying was for later and right now I had a problem to solve. But my sister had made one enormous mistake, and she made it because she had spent her whole life thinking of me as the drudge, the one who just did bedside, too plodding and too invisible to ever be a danger to her shining little empire. She didn't know that the same profession she'd mocked for 6 years had trained me to document everything, and that I could prove exactly where I was, and what I was doing, on every single day her forged records claimed I'd been supervising her clinic. Before I tell you what my documentation proved, and what happened when the truth about Radiant Life Wellness came out, tell me what time it is where you are right now, and whether you've ever had the thing you worked hardest for turned into a weapon against you. I want to see how far this story travels. I have to explain what I do, because it's the whole spine of this story, and it's the exact thing my family spent years treating as beneath them. I'm a hospital nurse. Bedside, medical surgical floor, 12-hour shifts. It is not glamorous work. It is the opposite of glamorous. It is bodies and alarms and grief and paperwork and standing for 12 hours doing the unrelenting, invisible, life and death labor that keeps human beings alive while their families sit in the waiting room. And the single most important habit my profession beat into me, the one that turned out to save my entire life, is this: you document everything. Every med, every dose, every assessment, every time. Not because you're paranoid. Because in medicine, the record is the truth, and if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen, and if it was written down wrong, someone can die. Nurses live and die, professionally, by the chart. My family found this beneath them. My mother, especially. My mother had wanted daughters with careers she could describe glamorously at her book club, and hospital nurse was not it. She would tell people I was in healthcare, in a vague hopeful way, and then pivot immediately to Camille. When I got my RN, after 6 years and a mountain of loans, my mother's comment was that it was a lot of school to end up cleaning up after sick people. She called my degree a waste. To my face. More than once. Camille is 3 years younger than me, and from the time we were small, our family ran on a rule no one said out loud: Camille is the one who'll be somebody, and Delia is the one who'll be useful. She was the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could sell anything to anyone. I was the reliable one, the one who'd always have a steady little job. There were 3 moments I never let myself feel until much later. When I was in nursing school, drowning in clinicals and loans, I missed a family dinner because I had a 12-hour rotation, and my mother told the table I was off playing hospital again while Camille's modeling gig got passed around like news. When I graduated, 6 years, top of my cohort, my mother came to the ceremony and spent it telling the parents beside her about Camille's new boyfriend, and afterwards said it was a lot of school to end up cleaning bedpans. And when we were teenagers, Camille used to introduce me to her friends as my sister the nurse in a tone that made it sound like an apology, and I let it go every time, because minding was ungracious and Camille sparkled and I didn't, and that was simply the natural order of things. Each moment was small. That was the trap of it. Each one taught me the same lesson in a softer voice, that what I did was real work, and real work, in my family, was invisible next to anything that shined. I want to be fair, because fairness is the whole point of this story. Camille was not born a villain. She'd been raised to believe that charm was the same as substance, that appearances were the currency that mattered, that if something looked successful it was successful. No one ever taught her that some things have to actually be real underneath. So when she opened a wellness company and needed a licensed medical professional's name on the paperwork to make it legitimate, because that kind of business legally requires medical supervision, she didn't experience taking my license as fraud. She experienced it as borrowing a formality from the sister who had one and wasn't using it for anything glamorous anyway. In her mind, my license was a decoration I wasn't making the most of, and she was just putting it to better use. My family built her to think like that. And they built me too, built the useful, plodding, invisible drudge whose hardest-won achievement they thought so little of that my own sister felt free to forge it. That is the cruelty at the center of this. It wasn't only that Camille stole my professional identity. It's that she could only have done it because our whole family had spent decades teaching her that what I did didn't really count. You don't forge the signature of someone you respect. You forge the signature of someone you've decided is furniture. I found out I was furniture on a Tuesday afternoon, in a hospital parking lot, with the state board on the phone. Let me tell you what Radiant Life Wellness actually was, because it matters. Camille had opened it 2 years earlier with a business partner and a lot of borrowed money and an even larger amount of confidence. It offered the kind of services that live in a legal gray zone, for vitamin drips, hormone optimization, weight loss injections, cosmetic treatments, the sort of medical-adjacent wellness business that has exploded everywhere, and that, crucially, requires a licensed medical professional to oversee it. You cannot legally run that kind of clinic on charm. Somewhere in the paperwork, a real licensed person has to be accountable for what's being put into people's bodies. Camille did not have that person. Or rather, she'd had one at the very start, a nurse practitioner who'd signed on as medical director and then, I later learned, quit within a few months when she saw how Camille actually ran things, cutting corners, ignoring protocols, treating medical oversight as a branding problem rather than a safety one. When that woman left, Camille had a choice. She could shut down until she found real medical supervision. Or she could keep the doors open, keep the money coming, and simply manufacture the oversight on paper. She chose the paper. And the name she reached for was mine. Because I was convenient. I was family, so she had access to my information. I was a real RN with a real license in good standing, so my name would hold up to a casual glance. And I was the drudge, the useful one, the sister whose life was so far beneath her notice that she genuinely believed I'd never find out, and that even if I did, I'd be too meek to do anything about it. She had my license number from years back. I'd given it to her once, innocently, when she said she needed it for some family insurance thing. And for 2 years, she and her partner had been signing my name to supervision records, listing me as the accountable medical professional for a clinic I had never set foot in, putting my license behind treatments I had never reviewed being given to patients I had never seen. Do you understand what that means? It means that for 2 years, if anything had gone wrong at that clinic, if a patient had been harmed, if a treatment had gone bad, it would have come back to me. My name was on it. My license was accountable for it. Camille hadn't just stolen my professional identity. She'd made me the person who'd take the fall for whatever her cut corners eventually caused. She'd used the thing I'd worked hardest for in my life as a human shield for her business. And the whole time, at family dinners, she called my nursing a steady little job, and my mother called my degree a waste, and I passed the potatoes and said nothing. I did not confront Camille when I got off the phone with the board. I want you to understand that, because every instinct screamed at me to call her and scream. I didn't. I have spent my career in rooms where the calm person is the one who saves the life, and I knew, with total clarity, that the moment I called my sister in a rage, I'd become the hysterical one, the emotional one, and on the emotional terrain where my family lived, I would lose, the way I'd always lost. Camille would cry, my mother would rally to her, and somehow I'd end up being the unreasonable one for making a scene over a misunderstanding. So I did what my profession taught me. I documented. The board needed me to prove I hadn't signed those records. And here is where my sister's entire scheme collided with the one thing she'd never respected about me. I could prove it. Because I am a nurse, and nurses are the most documented workers on earth. Every shift I've ever worked exists in a hospital's records, time-stamped badge swipes, medication administrations logged to the minute under my login, charting with my electronic signature, shift schedules, payroll. My whole professional life is an unbroken, time-stamped, legally protected record of exactly where I was and what I was doing, 12 hours at a time. So I pulled it. All of it. I requested my own employment records, my badge access logs, my charting timestamps. And I laid Camille's forged supervision records next to my real hospital records, date by date. And it was devastating. On dozens of the dates when I'd supposedly been supervising treatments at Radiant Life Wellness, I was demonstrably, provably, on the medical surgical floor of a hospital 40 minutes away, logged into a patient's chart, administering medications under my own credentials, my badge swipes bracketing a full 12-hour shift. I could not have been in two places at once. The forged records didn't just lack my signature, they were impossible. The truth wasn't a matter of my word against Camille's. It was a matter of two sets of timestamps, one real and one fabricated, and the real ones had a hospital's legal weight behind them. I want to describe those two stacks, because I keep seeing them. On the left, my sister's forged records, clean, confident, my name in a looping signature that wasn't mine, on letterhead with a logo she'd paid a designer good money for. On the right, my real records, ugly, dense, time-stamped to the minute, a badge swipe at 6:52 a.m., a medication logged at 7:15, a chart note at 7:40, the unglamorous exhaust of a real 12-hour shift. Her forgery looked more professional than my truth. That's the thing about people who deal in sparkle, their lies are always better looking than your facts. But her beautiful signature couldn't put me in two places at once, and my ugly timestamps could prove I'd been at a dying man's bedside 40 minutes away while she claimed I was supervising her clinic. Beauty lost to a badge swipe. It usually does, in the end. I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning with the two stacks of paper side by side, and I understood that the thing my family had spent my whole life belittling, the plodding, unglamorous, obsessive documentation of a bedside nurse, was about to be the thing that saved my license and exposed my sister. The waste of a degree. The steady little job. It had made me the single hardest person in the world to frame, and my sister had gone ahead and framed me anyway, because she'd never once looked closely enough to understand what I actually was. Here is what I did over the next several weeks, and here is what I did not do. I did not blow it up on the family group chat. I did not call Camille and scream that she'd nearly cost me my career. I did not post, or warn the cousins, or give my sister the emotional confrontation she was so much better at than me. What I did was cooperate fully with the board, methodically, and let the records speak. I gave the investigator everything. My timeline, my hospital records, my badge logs, a sworn statement, my complete cooperation, and I made one thing crystal clear to them, in writing, that I would help them establish the truth completely, and that the truth was that I had never worked at Radiant Life Wellness, never signed those records, and never authorized the use of my license, but that I was not the one who had. The board's job, once my innocence was established, was to find out who had actually forged the records. And that trail led exactly one place. Because here is the thing about a licensure fraud investigation, it does not stop at clearing the victim. Once the board established that my signature was forged, the question became who forged it, and forging a medical professional's license and running an unsupervised medical clinic on fabricated oversight records is not a family misunderstanding. It is a serious matter, with regulatory consequences and, potentially, criminal ones. I didn't have to do anything to Camille. I just had to tell the truth about myself, completely, and the machinery of consequence, a machinery I had no control over and hadn't set in motion, did the rest. Camille found out I knew the way these things always come out, through official channels, in writing, when the board formally contacted Radiant Life Wellness about the discrepancy. And then my phone lit up. She tried warmth first. Of course she did. She called me, and her voice was all sisterhood and panic, and she said, "Delia, oh my God, I think there's been a huge mix-up with the board, we need to talk, this is all a misunderstanding, you know I'd never." And I let her talk, and then I said, quietly, "Camille, I have my badge logs. I have my charting records. I know exactly which dates you signed my name, and I can prove I was at the hospital on every one of them. It's not a mix-up. I know what you did." The warmth evaporated. She switched, fast, to the family weapon. She said, "If you cooperate with them, you could destroy everything. My business, my whole life. Is that what you want? To ruin your own sister? Mom would be devastated. Family is supposed to protect family." And there it was, one last time, the machine that had run my whole life. My license nearly gone, my name forged onto medical records, patients treated under fraudulent oversight, and my sister's instinct was to make her exposure my moral failing. To reframe my telling the truth as me attacking the family. To ask the drudge to absorb the cost one final time, quietly, the way she always had. And I said the sentence I'd say again exactly the same way. I said, "Camille, I'm not ruining you. I'm refusing to go to prison for you. You put my license on a clinic I've never seen. If a patient had been hurt, it would have been my name, my career, my life. You didn't borrow my signature. You made me the person who'd take the fall. I'm not attacking the family. I'm just declining to be your shield." She started to cry, and she said, "You were never using it anyway. Your license. You just do bedside." I was doing something big. I want to sit with that sentence, because it is the whole family in 9 words. You were never using it anyway. As though a license is a dress hanging unworn in a closet, and not a promise a nurse makes to every stranger who will ever be unconscious and helpless in front of her. As though the fact that my competence was quiet meant it was available for the taking. She truly believed it. That was the most frightening part, not the malice, but the sincerity. My sister forged my name onto medical records and genuinely felt she was making better use of a thing I was wasting. And she felt that way because for 34 years, every person we both loved had agreed that my work was the kind you could borrow without asking. And I understood, in that moment, that she still didn't get it, that she genuinely believed my license was a thing I wasn't using, a decoration going to waste, and that her taking it had been almost a favor. 34 years of being told my work didn't count, distilled into one sentence from my sister as her whole world came apart, "You were never using it anyway." Now here is where the story becomes a choice, and it is not the choice my family expected, and it is probably not the one you'd expect either. Because the board asked me what I wanted. Not in those words, but as the investigation proceeded, it became clear that the degree of consequence Camille faced would be shaped, in part, by my cooperation and my statements. I could push, I could make sure the board and, potentially, prosecutors understood the full scope of it, the 2 years, the deliberateness, the fact that she'd knowingly used my identity as a liability shield. I could ensure my sister faced the maximum. Given what she'd nearly cost me, given the years of contempt, there was a version of this where I helped burn Camille's life completely to the ground, and where it would have been entirely just. I thought about it. On the bad nights, I thought about it a great deal. But I kept asking myself what I actually wanted underneath the fury, and it was not to destroy my sister. What I wanted was my license safe, my name cleared, and the certainty that Camille could never do this to me, or to some other convenient person, again. And also, if I'm honest, I wanted the patients at that clinic to be safe, because I am a nurse, and the thing that actually kept me up at night was not Camille's forgery. It was the image of real people getting real injections under fabricated medical oversight, and no one accountable actually watching. So I did the precise thing. I told the board the complete truth. I did not minimize it, and I did not embellish it. I did not push for maximum destruction, and I did not beg for leniency. I let the facts be exactly as large as they actually were, no more and no less, which is the only honest way to hold a record, and which is my entire professional creed. The consequences Camille faced would be the consequences her own actions had actually earned, calibrated by people whose job it was to calibrate them, and I would not put my thumb on that scale in either direction. I would not lie to protect her. And I would not exaggerate to bury her. What that meant in practice, Radiant Life Wellness was shut down, because it had never had legitimate medical supervision and could not suddenly manufacture it. Camille faced a fraud matter that resolved, in the end, through a combination of restitution, penalties, and a formal record that would follow her for a long time, though not, as it happened, prison, because the truth, told accurately, supported serious consequences but not the worst ones, and I had committed to the truth being exactly its actual size. My license was fully cleared. The board issued me a formal letter confirming I had been a victim of the fraud, not a participant, and that letter is one of my most valuable possessions. My mother did not handle it well, which is to say she handled it exactly as 34 years should have taught me to expect. Her first reaction was not concern for my nearly destroyed license. It was to ask me, in a wounded voice, whether I really had to involve the authorities, whether I couldn't have handled it within the family, whether I understood what this would do to Camille. My license, the waste, the steady little job, had been forged onto fraudulent medical records, and my mother's instinct was still, even now, to ask the useful daughter to absorb it quietly so the glamorous one wouldn't face consequences. I told my mother evenly that the state nursing board is not a thing you handle within the family, and that Camille had put my entire career at risk, and that I had done nothing but tell the truth about my own life. And my mother said, "But it was just paperwork, Delia. No one got hurt." And I said, "I could have gotten hurt. My whole life could have, and you still can't see it, because you've never once thought of what I do as real." And she didn't have an answer for that, because there wasn't one. The 18 months after that were not dramatic. That's the part these stories never show. Camille and I do not speak much, and I've stopped pretending that's a wound I need to heal. She is quieter now, humbled in a way that has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the fact that a person who built her whole self on appearing successful cannot easily recover from being formally, officially exposed as someone who faked the substance underneath. She works a regular job now, for someone else, under someone else's oversight. That is not a punishment I inflicted. It is just the natural weight of the truth settling where it belonged. My father surprised me, the way the quiet parent sometimes does. He'd spent my whole life letting my mother set the family's opinion of everyone, present and pleasant and uninvolved. A few months after it all settled, he came to see me, and he sat in my small kitchen, and he said, "I read that letter the board sent you. The one clearing you." He was quiet, and then he said, "It said you were the victim. And I realized I'd spent your whole life letting your mother call your work small, and it turned out your work was the only thing solid enough in this family to stand up in an actual investigation." It wasn't a grand speech. But it was my father finally seeing the thing I actually am, and I decided to let it count, because he's getting old and I'm tired of waiting for cleaner sentences than people can make. My mother took the longest, because she had the most to unbuild. She'd spent decades constructing a family with a daughter who'd be somebody and a daughter who was merely useful, and it does not survive the afternoon the useful one's despised little career turns out to be the only unfalsifiable thing any of them owned. For months she was defensive. Then, close to a year later, she came to my apartment, and she sat down, and she said, "I want to say something and I don't want you to make it easy for me." She said, "I called your degree a waste for 6 years. I said it to your face. And that degree, that waste, is the only reason you didn't lose everything when your sister came for it." I looked at the hardest, most real thing either of my daughters ever did, and I called it nothing, because it didn't sparkle. "I'm sorry." She didn't ask me to forgive her. That's the only reason it landed. It was the first thing my mother had ever said to me that didn't have an instruction folded inside it. I told her it would take time. She said she knew. She asks about my work now, actual questions about actual shifts, the way you ask about something you've decided is real. And she has never once used the word waste again. People ask me whether it was revenge. I didn't forge anyone's signature. I didn't run a medical clinic on fabricated oversight, or use my own sister as a human shield against my cut corners, or put another person's hardest-earned credential at risk to keep my money flowing. I didn't do a single one of the things that made the consequences arrive. Camille did all of that, quietly, for 2 years, while she and my mother called my career a waste. All I did was tell the truth about my own life, backed by the one thing my profession had drilled into me over 10,000 hours of unglamorous work, the record. I keep the record. That's what a nurse does. And when my sister tried to write me into her fraud, she discovered that she'd chosen, as her shield, the single most thoroughly documented person she knew, a woman whose every working hour was time-stamped and legally protected, who could prove her innocence down to the minute. She reached for the drudge because she thought the drudge was safe to use. The drudge turned out to be the one person alive she could never successfully frame. Here is what everybody lost. Camille lost the story, the one where she was the one who'd be somebody, the glamorous success, while I did my steady little job. She lost it when the substance she'd faked collapsed under an investigation that my waste of a degree was solid enough to survive and hers was not. My mother lost the arrangement, the family with a daughter who sparkled and a daughter who was merely useful. And she's the only one who has, eventually, done anything honest with the loss. And I lost something too, and it wasn't Camille. I lost the belief that if I worked hard enough, and was useful enough, and stayed humble enough about it, my family would eventually see that what I did was real. I waited 34 years for that. It never came from being useful. It came the day my despised profession turned out to be the only thing in the whole family that could stand up in a court of fact, and my father read a letter that used the word victim, and finally understood which daughter had been building something real the entire time. Something happened at the hospital a few months after it settled that meant more than the letter did. A newer nurse on my floor, someone who'd heard a version of the story, asked me, quietly, at the end of a shift, how I'd survived having my license nearly taken. And I told her the truth, that I survived it because I chart everything, because I badge in and badge out, because I never once treated the record as busy work even on the nights it felt like it. And I watched her file that away, this young nurse, and start charting a little more carefully after that. That was when I understood that the habit my family called a waste wasn't just what saved me, it was something I could hand to someone else, so that the next time a person like Camille went looking for someone safe to erase, they'd find one more woman who'd quietly made herself impossible to forge. I keep that letter from the board framed on my wall now. Not my diploma, though I'm proud of it. The letter. The one that says, in the cold official language of an investigating body, that Delia Frost was the victim of a fraud and that her license is in good standing. Because that letter is the thing that was actually true. My family could call my degree a waste, could call my work a steady little job, could believe the glamorous sister over the plodding one. They could not, in the end, argue with a hospital's timestamps and a state board's findings. When I remember that phone call now, the one in the parking lot, I don't remember the fear first. I remember what I said to the woman from the board, I'll prove I never signed anything. And then going home and doing the one thing I have always known how to do, the thing my whole family thought was beneath them, keeping the records so carefully, so completely, that when someone finally came to erase me, the truth of exactly who I was and where I'd been was already written down, in 10,000 timestamps, impossible to forge. They called my degree a waste. It turned out to be the only thing in the family that couldn't be faked. So if there's someone in your life who treats the thing you worked hardest for as small, who's so sure your work doesn't count that they'd feel free to use it, or take it, or put their own risk behind it, ask yourself one thing tonight. Is it actually small? Or is it just so real, so unglamorous, so quietly solid, that the people who deal in sparkle can't understand it's the strongest thing in the room? Thank you for staying with this story to the end. Every character and event in it is fictional, written for reflection and entertainment. But if any of it felt familiar, I hope it leaves you with this: keep your own record. The work you do that no one claps for, the credential no one respects, the hours no one sees, document them, value them, know their worth even when the people around you don't. Because the day someone decides you're safe to erase, the only thing that will save you is the truth you quietly kept about who you really are. Sparkle fades. The record holds.